The U.S. Federal Reserve hikes interest rates to curb inflation, while Xi Jinping meets with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. The 299 News starts tomorrow.
Welcome to the 299 News. I'm Aiden.
I'm Cole, and introducing our special guest, returning for a second episode, Cameron.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Okay, moving on. Alright. Earlier this week, President of China Xi Jinping went to Moscow to talk with Vladimir Putin. And the week previous, he met with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, in Ukraine. And this has been seen as a peacekeeping visit, an attempt to negotiate peace with both sides, which has been unsuccessful. Now, China and Russia have had interesting relations over the last war, and Putin has even stated that he wanted more Chinese support during the war, which he hadn't received. But this, in Moscow, they discussed this. They signed two joint documents, one detailing plans for economic cooperation and one that plans to deepen the Russian-Chinese partnership and the economy. Reached an agreement to build a pipeline in Siberia that would deliver Russian gas to China through Mongolia, and agreed that nuclear war must never be unleashed. Discussed their concern on the new AUKUS pact, a defense pact between Australia, the UK, and US against China, mostly, and expressed concern over NATO's growing presence in Asia on military and security issues, according to the BBC. That was their main topics of discussion. So, and earlier today, the Polish Prime Minister called China and Russia's relations a dangerous axis. So, what do you guys think of that quote in particular?
I think it is kind of I think it's kind of scary that like the Chinese president and the Russian president are meeting together. That's usually pretty scary. Two major superpowers meeting together. It's pretty scary. That have the will to take over the world with no remorse. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, I'd have to second
that. I agree with that. With the Polish Prime Minister, right? The Polish Prime Minister who said that.
Yeah, I believe so. Pete, you got any thoughts you'd like to add on?
I'd have to second that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the U.S. and China have, of course, had a interesting relationship recently, especially under the Biden administration and the Trump administration, which has been called by many people the second Cold War between the two. Even though both Biden and Xi Jinping have said that this is not a Cold War between the two of them. Do you guys believe that we're getting into a second Cold War now?
I think we were always in a Cold War. I don't think there has been a break.
Really?
I mean, there's always been I think we've always been kind of been ready for Russia to do something. They're always an opponent. I don't think we're ever going to be friends with them.
Okay, I agree with you there. But I agree with you that we've never been friends with Russia, except for World War II, of course. But even then, that was kind of shaky.
Well, we weren't. I mean, were we really friends? I mean, they kind of just joined us. We weren't really friends with them then because they just joined the Allies because
Russia turned on them.
Betrayed. They got betrayed by the Germans.
But after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Russia's military was very scattered around, and they struggled to actually build up their military. Let me pull up and look in this. So Russia and the U.S. signed the START II arms deal treaty in January of 1993, and afterwards there wasn't really much conflict between Russia and the U.S. until the Putin administration, I believe. So I don't necessarily know if the Cold War necessarily has always been going on. I mean, even after the Soviet Union collapsed, China wasn't as strong as they are now. But you could predict that they were going to be as strong as they were. So, I don't know. Do any of you have any thoughts you'd like to share on that? Take that as a no. Page. Actually, Russia fought wars in Tajikistan in 1992 and in Georgia in 1992. But that's about it. And then there was the Chechen War in 1990, the first Chechen War in 1944. I mean 1994. But
Then 2014 they invaded in Crimea.
2008 they invaded Georgia, which lasted for about 2 weeks, and then in 2014 they invaded Ukraine for the first time and annexed Crimea from them. And after the Minsk agreement in 2015, that invasion ended, and now in 2022 in February he launched another invasion on Ukraine.
So in 2015, did they just call it like equal win?
No, it was a treaty headlined by Germany and other European powers, basically saying, "Hey, don't do this." And what it was is it basically gave Ukraine time to prepare for the next Russian invasion because it never actually ended the war. It gave Ukraine time to prepare for the next invasion, which they were, of course, in 2022. As you can see, Russia isn't moving as quickly as they did in 2014 when they easily took Crimea. Ukraine is now actually getting close to retaking Crimea back from Russia. And if they were to retake Crimea, then it would be almost a symbol of Russian loss in the war.
So yeah.
And sticking with Russia, last week Bashar al-Assad, the leader of the majority region in Syria, also visited Russia. He's been a dictator, specifically during the Syrian civil war that has lasted the last 10 plus years. Also visited Russia last week to discuss probably Syrian issues and Russian issues and war, since they both are fighting wars at the moment. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Do you guys have any comments on Syria before I change the topic completely?
Nope.
No, I'm good.
All right. I'm going to change it to our favorite politician to talk about. On Business Insider yesterday, our governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, said
Damn,
that
I thought you were going to say Trump.
No. Governor of Florida and Republican Ron DeSantis said if he was the Republican candidate in 2024 and faced Biden in a presidential election, he believes he would win. He said this on Piers Morgan Uncensored. And he was asked by Piers Morgan if he thinks he could beat Joe Biden. He said, "I think so." He said, "But ultimately, the guy I'm going to focus on is Biden because I think he's failed the country. I think the country wants a change," is what DeSantis said in the interview with Piers Morgan. So, Ron DeSantis is clearly keeping his eye on the 2024 election. And he's going to keep his eye on his other rival in the Republican area to decide if he's going to run or not. So, any comments before we move on again? Right.
Well,
so that's all.
I could talk about the special forces right now in Ukraine. Their
All right.
operation.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, units from the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Services of Ukraine destroyed a Strela-10 anti-aircraft missile system and a medium amphibious transport vehicle belonging to Russian invaders of the southern front. And so So they used these drones called kamikaze drones, and they would slam them into into their targets and like explode them.
Which also destroys the drone, of course. It destroys itself
Yeah.
to destroy the
Well,
thing
yeah.
it's targeting.
Yep, exactly. So it does
As a
destroy the.
clarification for the viewer. As a
Yeah,
clarification.
that is good. That is good clarification. It does destroy the drone and its target.
And
It
attempts to
kind of
destroy its target.
in the attempt to accomplish the mission. And this is fairly big deal because this anti aircraft system has been taking down a lot of stuff, like a lot of low level like targeting, like at helicopters and planes. They've been taking down quite a bit of those, quite a bit of planes and helicopters of the Allied forces, NATO forces. Probably be a better way to say that. NATO forces. This isn't World War II.
Well, I'm surprised that a no-fly zone hasn't been enacted yet in Ukraine.
Really?
Because NATO quickly put a no-fly zone in the Yugoslav wars in 1992.
That's kind of
As
weird.
soon as yeah, so I know they didn't do it in 2014, but I don't think it didn't last as long as this, I believe.
Huh.
So I'm surprised that NATO and the UN haven't tried to enforce a no-fly zone yet.
They should.
Because if there was a no-fly zone, then I believe that Ukraine would win a lot quicker. Possibly, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not knowledgeable enough about ground wars.
I don't know much about the war in Ukraine, but wouldn't a no-fly zone help?
Well, it just prevents both sides from flying in the air. So
there
all it
isn't
does.
going to be there is. So they actually said there isn't going to be a no-fly zone in the Ukraine.
But I mean, like,
That doesn't surprise me.
Russia's got more resources than Ukraine, so I mean,
Yeah,
that just
but
seems weird.
but NATO's also supplying Ukraine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are.
So it's really which we've already talked about it before on our podcast, but Russia says if they lose in Ukraine, they're going to blame it on NATO. So, which makes sense because from their standpoint that I mean we have supplied heavily Ukraine. We've sent another $500 million package I think to Ukraine earlier this week for aid. A lot of our tax money goes to Ukraine now, which some people like, some people dislike. I'm not going to pick sides.
Me neither. Yeah, I'm kind of neutral about it.
Yeah. I encourage people to read about the people in Ukraine, and what I really hope comes out of this war is I want to read a memoir of one of the Russian soldiers in the war. I'd like to read one of their memoirs from this.
I want to read a little bit of both sides.
Yeah. Well, there's a book by Zelensky that came out earlier this year, last year, that he wrote. It's just a compilation of all of his speeches, but it's all about Russia and how he doesn't like Russia and his opinions and the history of it and all that stuff. It's a good book. I think it's called "A Message from the People of Ukraine." I think something like that. Actually, let me look it up. I have it. It's just not in my possession at the moment. It's a message from Ukraine, I think. It's a good book.
I want to read it.
Yeah, there it is. A Message from Ukraine by Volodymyr Zelensky. And it's just a compilation of like 20 of his speeches, and they're all really good speeches. So I got through the book in 2 hours, and I read really slowly, so it's a quick read. But yeah, I encourage everybody to read the book because it gives you the exact perspective of what Ukraine sees in this war. And yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind reading it.
What's your address? I'll mail it to you.
Alright, so I'm going off my cheat sheet, but the Fed hiked interest rates about a quarter of a point to curb inflation. Despite some of the stuff that's been going on with the banks, some are even calling it the worst banking turmoil since the 2008 recession. So as everybody knows, the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed recently, and people are speculating that people are gonna, or maybe they even are, moving money from smaller, more locally owned, mid-sized banks that aren't FDIC insured to more larger corporate banks that are insured. Um, and they're seeing this as, and some have even speculated this is the corporatization of banks, but we can get to that another time. So the interest rate has increased from 5% to 5.25%. So it's gone up about a quarter of a point. They are saying it's going to curb inflation, but people don't think it. A lot of people don't think that's going to really help much. Now, the Fed is arguing that the U.S. banking system is sound and resilient, even though we're having banks collapse and interest rates going up. But and they say that recent developments are likely to result in tighter credit conditions for households and businesses and to weigh on economic activity, hiring, and inflation. The extent of these effects is unknown. So, yeah, that's just what I have on here.
Money.
You really had to ruin that segment, didn't you, Kim?
What?
All right, as you all know, it is now March, which means for us basketball fans, it is the greatest month of basketball ever, as it is March Madness, where 68 of the best college basketball teams are put into a tournament to determine who the champion is. And this year, we've already had some insane outcomes, as in round one, the one-seeded Purdue Boilermakers lost to Fairleigh Dickinson University. And now the one seed is now 150 wins and only 2 losses now. As 16th seeded Fairleigh Dickinson was the second ever 16 seed to win against a 1 seed, with the first one being UMBC beating Virginia a couple of years ago. And also, for the 11th time in sports history, a 15 seed beat a 2 seed, as Princeton beat Arizona in round 1. And now, on this day, we are at the Sweet 16, the final 16 teams. Number 1 Alabama will play number 5 San Diego State, and number 6 Creighton will play number 15 Princeton. And then East bracket, we have number 9 Florida Atlantic playing number 4 Tennessee, number 3 Kansas State playing number 7 Michigan State. In the West, it's 8 Arkansas taking on 4 UConn, number 3 Gonzaga taking on number 2 UCLA. And in the Midwest, it is number 1 Houston taking on Miami, Florida, number 5, and number 2 Texas taking on number 3 Xavier. With those being the final 16 teams in the men's bracket for the tournament. And 1 second, I'm going to pull up a women's bracket real quick. And on the women's bracket, we're also at the Sweet 16, where South Carolina, UCLA, Notre Dame, Maryland, Ole Miss, Louisville, Colorado, Iowa, UConn, Ohio State, Virginia Tech, Tennessee, Utah, LSU, Miami, Florida, and Villanova are the 16 teams left. As major upsets included Miami beating number 1 seed Indiana in the second round, and Ole Miss beating number 1 seed Stanford in the second round to get to the Sweet 16. Otherwise, the other 2 1 seeds, Virginia Tech and South Carolina, still remain. As South Carolina, not South Carolina. as 1 seeds have won 31 out of the 40 championships in the women's bracket, with the 2 seed winning 7, I believe, and the 3 seed only winning 2. Every other seed from 4 to 16 has never won the championship. So, and also Aaron Rodgers is on the Jets now, which is pretty insane. And also the Cardinals are getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins for some reason because they don't want their players anymore. They're getting rid of their one good player. Aiden, any comments on the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, Aiden.
Going back to suck them? Hey, Aiden, how many wins are the Cardinals getting next year? Without DeAndre Hopkins and only their quarterback. They're going to be the 3rd team ever to just get 0 wins.
0.
0.
Amateur prediction.
Accurate prediction.
And that's all the time we have for today. Our news is amazing. I'm Cole. That's Aiden. And that's our special guest, Cam. Thanks for listening. Now listen to some sick outro music.
And I am indeed special.